once again, I appreciate your time. I know you're in prep. I know you're busy, but I appreciate you coming on here. And I do know that people have been reaching out to me, giving me good feedback about these episodes that we've done. And they enjoy the content. And like Dave says, every time I talk to you, I feel better, even though we're not even really talking about me. So yeah. Um,
I think it's helpful to talk about a lot of this stuff because people talk about it almost in secret or they think about it. But when you can articulate it, it's its own therapy. Like, even if we don't talk about solutions, I mean, we'll talk about solutions, but even if we don't, sometimes it's good to be able to just have the discussion with other people who get it.
right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, I sent the questions that I had, because like we were just talking about with my audience, it's mainly people like me who just take either just lift every day, like college kids who take lifting seriously, to people who take it almost like a job, like I do, even though I've never competed. It's a big part of my life, to people who want to compete, which is me too, and then people who have competed. So my first question for you is, particularly with the mindset of bodybuilders like myself, how do you stay positive when obstacles get in the way, which is something I've been struggling with recently. Have had a lot going on, a lot of stress. So, and I'm hard on myself too if I don't stay on schedule. So, how do you stay positive, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And the question and the answer is you don't. I mean, you're a human being. You can't be, it's like saying to someone, how can you be happy 24/7? You can't. It would be nice to be happy 24/7,
Yeah.
but it's not realistic. The question I would want for you to ask yourself and for the listeners who are experiencing something similar is, when you're having a bad day or days or a moment, when how do you still do the things you're supposed to be doing? So if you know you have a training session and you're like, you had a crappy sleep, or you just woke up and you just felt horrible for whatever reason. Maybe it was a bad dream, maybe, again, a whole bunch of things. And you're like, I don't want to train. It's not about saying, how do I feel happy or motivated to train? It's learning how to get into the mindset that you're almost like a machine and you're going to do it whether you like it or not. Because most of the time, no matter how, can I swear on the podcast?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. No matter how shitty you might feel, it's still going in and doing the job. Now, I'm not saying you have to have a smile on your face. In fact, you can use that for, let's say leg day. You're feeling really, really crappy. You can have a really good leg day when you feel crappy because you can use that energy. Now, other times you might be really exhausted. You're like, I don't have the energy, especially of all days, to do leg day. Guess what? Some of my best workouts when I had no energy or very little energy, because I go in there tricking myself. You know what? I'm going to lighten the weight up and just do more reps. And that's what I start doing. But then I had another plate, and then all of a sudden I end up like an all-time best. Like, a lot of the times, the toughest part, Mark, is that we get caught up in our heads,
Yeah,
and it's learning how to say, do it anyway. It's like that Nike commercial, just do it, because a switch will end up turning on. Because if you've done this long enough, once you start, the hardest part in training is getting started. And if you can mentally get yourself into the gym, get your warm-up sets, get a few sets under your belt, you're going to feel so much better after the workout.
absolutely. Yeah, and I can say that from experience, that there's been times where I was tired, worn out, hungry, whatever, and you just have to mentally get through it. And I actually saw this video yesterday. I think it was on TikTok, and this is like a little different, but they said, if you feel like you're getting hungry, ask yourself, would you eat an apple? And if the answer is no, you're not hungry enough to just eat an apple, then that's your emotions playing with you. That's a lot of other stuff playing with you. That's messing with your head. So same thing with the gym. Like you just said, you can't get in your head. You just got to turn into a machine. So that's great advice, Lesley.
It's also easier said than done, though.
Oh yeah.
So in order to execute, I would tell people, practice being a machine in the good times and the bad. So when the bad does come, it's just a habit. It's almost like brushing your teeth. You don't think about it, you just do it.
Right. Yep. Exactly. I guess, well, that definitely takes us right into the next one. You know, how do you deal with doubt? With your goals in your life in particular, like, you know, one of mine is moving to Florida. Um, and so how do you deal with overcoming doubt with your goals in your life? And then again, with bodybuilding, like say you want to compete, but you're just too scared to get over that hump. You know, how do you deal with that doubt?
Keep in mind, you got a choice. You can try and it doesn't work out the way you want, and then you can fine tune it, or you don't try and you'll never find out at all.
Right.
So keep in mind, the other thing is expectations. I think it's really important to have realistic expectations. We all want to win. Let's be honest. We all want to win when we do a show.
Yeah.
Especially if, let's say, you know, you're in the best, you know, presentation you've ever had. You're thinking, I'm going in there. You have a positive mindset. You go in there and you're backstage. You see the lineup and you see guys, like for you, for me, it's the women, for you guys. And you're like, what planet did they come from? And then your self-esteem goes like right down the tube.
Yeah.
Your confidence goes right down the tube. It's learning to have little tricks, mental tricks that you can use with yourself. And it's a lot of it self-talk. So I tell people all the time, it really doesn't matter what your opponent, the people that you're competing with look like. If they don't know how to pose, you can outpose them. So keep in mind, everyone's got their strength. So it doesn't matter how much you bench. It doesn't matter how much you leg press to a certain degree. Because when it comes to bodybuilding, they don't care. They just care what you look like. They don't care how much, you know, how much you can lift or how much you can push. All they care is the aesthetics, you know, the muscle definition, as far as, you know, how deep the lines go with conditioning. That's all they care about. And if you know how to show your physique off, because most of us don't have a complete physique. We have these, you know, our little flaws that we want to work on. If you go with a posing coach that can help you hide them as much as possible and to accentuate, you know, the strengths that you do have, you can beat that person that you're intimidated by backstage. So it's about making sure you you do all your due diligence. Yes, it's important to train. Yes, it's important to eat properly. Have a coach who knows what they're doing to keep you on track. You know, not just the information, but keep you on track as accountable. Because when you're in prep and your carbs go down, your ability to think clearly goes out the window. And there's something called peak week. So for people who have not competed yet, peak week is the 7 days leading up to a show. Those can be very stressful because a lot can go wrong and a lot is riding on it. So when you get caught up on social media, and we can talk about that in a little bit, if you get caught up on social media comparing yourself to, let's say, some of your competitors and they're looking amazing, well, one, that can get into your head. But a lot happens between that and the time people go on stage. Look at a lot of, you know, for anyone who does watch bodybuilding shows, regardless of the category, people can look great before the show. And you're like, oh, they're going to win. For sure, they're going to win. And then all of a sudden, you see them on the show, and it's like, what happened? You know, it's not like they ate a bunch of donuts. Although some guys actually get bigger and better with donuts, but I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot can go wrong with the body as far as, you know, what's going on. Because even if you follow the, you know, the water, the salt, like whatever you need to do, if your cortisol levels are too high, you're going to be retaining water. Doesn't matter. So it's important to make sure you focus on your lane, what you need to do, and don't look at the other people. We get really caught up in comparisons as far as, and that's part of the expectation is I have to be better than the other person. Well, from a judging standpoint, you do. But judges are objective. They're supposed to be objective. Us, when we're judging ourselves, we're subjective. We can't, by definition, we can't be objective about ourselves. So that's what I'm saying. Stay in your lane, avoid the comparisons, listen to your coach, and focus on getting all those things that are within your control right. The training, obviously the eating, the prep, the posing is so key. I know a lot of people, especially the younger people and Mark people who are new to competing, they're like, competing is expensive. I get it. I'm a female. You would not believe what females have to go through in their prep.
Yeah.
Not to mention our suits are like 10 times the cost of your trunks.
Yeah. Seriously.
But, there is a process, and I wouldn't cut corners on posing. I really wouldn't, because that can make or break you making, that first call out. So the first 5 or 6 people, that's what the first call out is. And you can make or break being first or second. The posing is so key. If you don't have the money for a posing coach, I would hold off on doing a show. If you want to do a show just to see and go in there to say, hey, I just want practice, I want to know how what it's like. Okay, do it. But if you're going in there and you really want to do well, get a posing coach. Put the proper investment in. If you're going to do it properly.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that's a reason a lot of people don't do it is, they don't, first of all, they may not have the money. And even if they do, they don't want to spend so much money and then get to a certain point and be like, I can't do it anymore. And then they just kind of like blew all this money, even though in reality they really didn't, because you still look probably good, even if you didn't do the show. So it wasn't for nothing, but yeah, it's, that's, that's one tough thing about it for sure. I mean, that's certainly something that I've contemplated myself too.
And there's also novice shows too, Mark. So, I mean, the novice shows are categories where, it's just to show off your transformation. I think they still do give like first, second, and thirds. I'm not 100% on that, but I mean, it's not as much pressure, but it's more just for people who, let's say, they've never been on a stage. It's scary. People are judging you. Like, what female, I know it's hard for males too, but Mark, what female in their right mind would get up in a bikini in front of a bunch of people and be judged on her body?
Yeah, I can't say that I know someone that would do that. So
now you do.
Except
And
for you,
every female competitor goes through that. But I mean, it's like, you have to be, and we can go down another rabbit hole with that one. But I mean, it's having an identity as an athlete, but you also have an identity otherwise. Now, I'm not talking about like, whether you're a parent or a sibling, I'm talking about having something outside of bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is important, and it can have, it can be a great stress relief as well.
Yeah.
It can be a source of, where you can put various energies and to say, okay, how far can I tax my body? But it's important to have a life outside of bodybuilding too, just to get a little bit more balance in there. Because if you don't do well in the sport for whatever reason, and keep in mind, you can work your tail off. You could follow everything your coach tells you and still not do well. And sometimes because it's genetics. Genetics plays a huge part in people doing really well. I'm not saying you can't do well without genetics, but you're only going to get so far with it. And if you put all your identity into a sport, not just bodybuilding, could be any sport, and that's all you are, and you don't do well, then it's easy to take that in. So if you lose, or if you're in a team sport and your team does not do well, that you take that in. I don't mean you personally, but I'm saying an athlete will take that in to part of their identity, and they'll call themselves a loser. They won't be able to, feel that they're successful at anything. So there's a lot of negative self-talk. And it's about taking yourself that, yes, you're an athlete, part athlete, but you're also something else too. And if people need help on how to create that, because sometimes they're raised like from 5 years old, let's say a baseball player, 5 years old, that's all they know. Apart from going to school, that's all they do.
Yeah.
They may not have an identity because that hasn't been created.
Right.
So I actually, as a mental game coach, I help people develop an identity if they don't have one.
Interesting. Yeah, that, believe it or not, that's something that I can be an example of, because for many years, I was like, bodybuilding is my life. That's all I care about. And it came before everything else. Even though I wasn't even trying to compete, I just wanted to get bigger. So yeah, it is important to to balance, because it's unhealthy to not balance that, unless you're prepping like you are right now. And that probably comes, that's probably the top thing right now for sure.
It's definitely up there, but I still have a career that's outside of like it's, I'm also a psychotherapist, so I still, work with my clients. Now, close to the show, I will book that time off because I won't have the focus to be able to deal with my clients properly. So I usually take like peak week off.
Yeah.
Sometimes 2 weeks before. It depends on how I'm feeling, depends on how depleted. And I'm also working with athletes. So again, I have to be on my A game to be able to help clients, whether they're regular people or athletes.
So I'm just curious, how do you when you prep, because I feel like if I was in prep, like I would be so short tempered. You know what I mean? Like that. I don't know. Maybe not, but that's just me. Like how do you deal with that? I mean, do you get short tempered, or do you get just I'm not sure.
So for me, I am so lucky. I don't get, the only time I would get short tempered is if someone ate my food.
Okay.
Because I measure out my food ahead of time. I have it in like Tupperware. So if someone, and no one would, but I'm saying if someone did, because you're such on as you know, you're on a regimen of what you need to eat, certain quantities. And if I have to eat, I wouldn't have time to make it. So I would be cranky that if someone ate my food. But other than that, again, it doesn't happen. And who's going to eat my food? Because it's like chicken or rice. And it's kind of boring food. It's not like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's very healthy. But, I don't get cranky. I get tired. Like what will happen in the gym eventually is I will actually walk into equipment. I laugh because every show I have like a bruise or a scrape or something before the show because I walk into the machinery because I'm so tired.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not, or, I'll forget people's names. I'll be lucky if I remember my name because I'm so tired.
Wow.
But I don't, unfortunately, I don't get cranky. I'm lucky. I know some people, and I know, and you may have seen some people in the gym. You have to stay away from them.
Yeah.
And they're nice people. It's just that when they're in prep or if
Yeah.
they're on certain kind of, PEDs, that affects their ability to be more rational. And then
Yeah.
again, with the diet. So if you have the PEDs and the diet, which is really can be very extreme, that can make people really angry. So I understand that. And I don't take it personally anyway, but I'm just saying, for let's say people who aren't aware, people aren't necessarily like that all the time. I'm not necessarily excusing their behavior, but put it into context. Now, if you are one of those people and you do get angry during prep and you're like, well, how do I not like blow everyone, snap people's heads off, all the time? Learn how to train at different times. The gym will have busier times than others. So if you're able to manage it in your schedule, and some may not, change the time that you train. Going to train at dinner time or around 3:30 for most gyms is pretty busy. If you can either go super late or early, that's your best time to go. So you're not going to be disturbed as much.
Very true. Yeah.
And then let's say you have a job that you can only train, let's say I call it the witching hours, right? If it's the busy time, then put on some headphones so it's really clear, like the big bulky ones I have, so people can tell that you can't hear them.
Yeah.
Even if it's off, pretend you can't hear them and just do your thing. Most people know who's in prep and they just leave you alone anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes the little white ones don't work. Like I always have the little white ones. And sometimes people, they still think that you can hear them but yeah, when you have the big ones on, it's definitely like, yeah, you definitely can't hear me. So I'm not even going to try to talk to you. Yeah, Lesley, just to finish up here, and I'll use myself as an example again. There's a lot of people out there, particularly my age, young adult, um, that are into fitness and are not. But
Mhm.
regardless, there's that one thing. Like for me, like I said, I'm moving to. I want to move to Florida, and eventually I will, but I have to be patient. So for people that, because for me, I want to move down there because it's mainly better for fitness. It's better for my lifestyle. So that's the reason why I want to go down there. So for me and for other people who have pretty much a life changing decision that they know would be good for them, that they're working towards, how do you stay positive and how do you just not give up pretty much on that ultimate goal?
When you have a goal, I encourage people to have steps leading up to it. So have mini goals to get you to your goal. So, if the goal is to move to Florida, I would want you to have a timeline, a tentative one. I'm not saying it can't change, but a
Yeah.
tentative timeline. Are we talking this year? Are we talking next year? And to work backwards from that. Because if you know you want to be in Florida, let's say theoretically, December. I'm not saying it has to be, I'm not saying for you, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
theoretically, let's say it's December. Okay, we're in the month of May. So what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve every month to get you there? Do you have a place to live? Do you know where you want to work? What about the current place that you have? We're talking about logistics, making a checklist of all the logistics that you need to do. So if you maybe you have to sell your place, maybe you have to rent it out, maybe, whatever it might be. You have to put yourself in storage. What are you going to do about a car? Are you going to transport your car? Are you going to rent a car there? All that kind of due diligence, I would want you to put into like a to-do list and then put a time frame, because you're not going to do this all in one month, but to do maybe a few things every week to knock them off your list to keep you accountable. And then you've got your goal, because every time you check these things off, you're getting closer to your goal. And
Right.
then if you want to be further accountable, you'll tell somebody about it. Because the moment you tell somebody, then it becomes more real. And then a further thing, if you want to tell people online, if you do want to do a social post, that even
Yeah,
makes it
for
even
sure.
further accountable.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
As far as being positive, sometimes we're not positive. There's going to be times, Mark, I want to encourage you and the listeners to know that it's learning how to do things despite not feeling up to it. I'm not talking about just the gym. We have goals and we can get discouraged with our goals because it feels like sometimes roadblocks, life comes in the way and it's like, oh, there's another delay, and it's better to say, okay, we might have to extend the deadline. It's not what you wanted, but is it the worst case scenario? No, because you're still going to Florida. If it's not December, maybe it'll be May of next year, worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying don't be disappointed, but it can be demotivating. But just saying, okay, if anything, what's the positive? Well, I have more time to get everything done and to do more due diligence, but I need to be accountable. And again, if you need that accountability, whether, again, through these goals, telling somebody, working with an accountability coach. I help people, I will see them once a week or once every 2 weeks. I'll say, okay, what do you want to commit to doing? I'll write it down. They wrote it down. Let's see. And if they don't get it done, we talk about what has stopped them.
Right.
And if it's that, well, I didn't feel like it, well, we have to dive into that deeper. Okay, it's not just you didn't feel like it. Is it that you don't feel worthy to be able to do this for yourself? So sometimes it's going down deeper into layers that we're not aware of ourselves. As a therapist, I know how to dig down with somebody. So sometimes you need help to do that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And just so happens the person that can help you is right here, Lesley. um, which is like I've said before, you offered free counseling and I believe it's in December, and I took advantage of that, which was great. And it really helped me for sure. And everything that she just mentioned, some of the stuff that we talked about, and it really helped. So, Lesley, I appreciate your time once again. Um, did you want to plug your services and some of your pages?
Sure. So I'm a registered psychotherapist, but I'm a mental game coach for athletes. So when people say, well, what's the difference between the two? If I'm seeing someone who's in the fitness industry and they're having a relationship issue, as an example, or they're feeling anxious about being in the gym because they're not as fit as they were, let's say, pre-COVID or something like that. That would be something that I can help them as far as getting back on track with that injury. And so, or let's say the influence of social media, they get into their heads and that affects their ability to stay on track with their goals. That's where the mental game coaching can come into place. So, I appreciate you having me on here, Mark. I'm also on RX Muscles Iron Therapy with Dave Palumbo. So you can check us out. We do an episode every week. Yep. And I also have a YouTube channel. So if you want to find out my YouTube channel link, it's under my Instagram. So my Instagram, if you want to also follow me on Instagram, it's Lesley T_mental_iron.
I'll link those all below the video.
Perfect.
For sure.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Lesley. Like I said, I appreciate your time. It's great to have you back on, and hopefully I can have you back on again soon. So
sounds good.
All right, Lesley, thanks.
Thanks, Mark.